Broadcasting live to tape from beautiful Monmouth County, New Jersey. We're on a clear night. You can almost see he's back. It's the RutgersKev Show.
Kevin O'Keefe gets the win at Charlotte.
Kevin O'Keefe is going to take his first win and only his third start in the series. Beautiful job for Kevin O'Keefe.
Gonna troll me forever.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, Sean, take a look at his on his feed there. Very appropriate today. Oh boy.
I'm Matt Malone. I stream iRacing, but when I'm not racing, I'm listening to the RutgersKev Show with your host, RutgersKev.
How does he have 38 viewers?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the RutgersKev Show. Sorry it's been a couple of months since my last episode. A couple things happened. One, summer started. So, as some of you know, I'm a big horse racing fan, especially those of you who follow on Twitter, because I tweet about horse racing a lot. And I live about, by the crow flies, probably 3 miles from Monmouth Park. It only takes me less than 15 minutes to drive there. I love going there in the summer. It really takes up a lot of my time. Just a hobby I do, you know? So, because I'm away from my family a lot on the weekends, going to Monmouth Park, I try to spend more time with them during the weekdays. So therefore, I had to find a good balancing act to keep my wife and my kids happy, you know. So I'm spending more time with them during the week instead of rushing downstairs to record a podcast. Two, things are kind of the same in iRacing. It's hard to do a weekly podcast about iRacing where you're not just beating a dead horse. And I don't like beating a dead horse, so I could have an episode every week on the safety rating and an episode every week on certain things. And you know, some of you might enjoy it, but I think it gets a little samey, and I don't really want it to be the same thing of me just ranting every week. So that's another reason. Reason number 3, again, these are in no particular order, but reason number 3 is Randy decided to step away from the podcast for a bit, focus on his broadcasting duties. I respect that. So without Randy there to you know, when it's just you and you're not somebody else is counting on you to appear at a certain time to record a podcast, you're not, I didn't have that extra motivation to record a podcast. 3, number 4, I've kind of stopped streaming. I've decided to kind of stop being a content creator. I'm still going to do these podcasts, so I guess I can still consider myself a content creator, but I've decided to focus in on my driving. And frankly, it's because there's a lot of good streamers out there and they frankly do it better than me. I'm in virtual reality now. The stream's not looking as good. And the way I've done it with chat repeating back to me and everything like that, I just was focused more on the stream and not on my driving. So I didn't stream the Indy 500 major series. I did not stream the the Le Mans 24 Hours, again, the major series. I did not stream my race at Silverstone, again, major series. I did not stream major series 2.4 hours of Spa. And I did not stream the Autobahn 90 minutes at Daytona, opening round of this season of Autobahn. And frankly, I enjoyed racing in those a lot more than if I did stream it. I also found myself getting very good results. I had a better finish at Spa than I did at the Nürburgring. And I think it's because I could just focus in on what I was doing. You know, a lot of credit goes out to these guys. I've been saying it before in other episodes, like Nicky Tim and even Empty Box, even though it doesn't have his face cam on there. Matt, all these guys. Desperoni, that can talk and race at a pretty good pace. When I race, I need to focus. And it's really hard for me to focus and worry about what's happening in my chat room or trying to say something that's interesting or just certain things can go through your head, but when you say it, it becomes more toxic. For instance, there was a time in the majors IndyCar race where I came out of the pits and other guys on older tires, and I wanted to race him because, frankly, he'd hold me up because I'm on brand new tires. Now, because it was a green flag pit cycle, I'm technically a lap down, but I'm racing the guy. In fact, I was behind him when I pitted. So we were actually, he was 10th and I was 11th or something like that. And so I went to race him, and I said something like for the video, like, I'm going to race this guy because I'm faster than him, right? And then we went into the corner and crashed. And I think if I was paying more attention to me and what I need to do, I don't think we would have crashed. I take responsibility for that one, for the Majors Indy 500, because I was too worried about what I should say for my viewers instead of worried about my driving. And I think that when I'm at where I'm not racing that often, and I'm racing against really good competition, and it's leagues and systems where I care about the points, I think I just need to focus in on myself. So to those of you who are fans of the stream, I don't really know what to tell you. I mean, you've gone through these disappointments before with me stepping away. I highly recommend, there's a lot of streamers out there. I'm sure you just type in YouTube, find somebody that races a series that you like, and follow them, basically. Okay, one more topic. So the podcast I was going to do, but then decided not to do, was going to be about the Dirt Series, specifically the World Championship Series, because as you guys know, I'm a fan of the iRacing World Championship Series, all of them, and I think that iRacing esports has a very positive future, and I want the level of competition to reflect the professionalism that should be of the iRacing esports series. And what was going on in the Dirt Series, to me as a casual observer, just wasn't high quality stuff. And there's multiple reasons why that is. I'm not going to get into it now, but frankly, the reason why I didn't do the podcast was twofold. One, I've never raced dirt before. I didn't want to feel like I was coming and lecturing these guys when the dirt community is already kind of tight, I guess. I mean, they have their highs and their lows, but I mean, you're either a member of their community or you're not, and I'm not. And I didn't want to be like an outsider. So I wanted to do the podcast with somebody that was on the inside. And I did get somebody who was willing to come on the show and discuss it with me. But he kind of had the same opinion as me, a negative opinion. And, I just looked around, and I was just like going through a lot of stuff at work, going through a lot of stuff in the family. And I was like, look, I just don't have it in me right now to be negative for an hour and a half again. I just, it's not healthy to be negative all the time. Of course, this is coming from me, and everyone who's a fan of me knows that's kind of my personality, but I kind of am adapting and changing my ways in my older years. I'm getting to be 36 years old, so it's time to mature maybe a little bit. That being said, we're going to have an episode today with Dean Moll that may be more negative than positive. So I decided not to do it, because I frankly just didn't have it in me. And I think that was really the tipping point to go like, you know what? I don't need to be a content creator. I can have lots of fun. I can do my own thing, and I can share my experiences through my Discord and through my Twitter. And I've met a lot of good friends, people I would call friends, through iRacing, and they're all on my Discord. And you're welcome to join too. Link in the description. Come join the Discord, hang out. And that's all I need, frankly. I don't really need anything else out of iRacing right now, or out of Twitch or YouTube, than what I got right now. So why go and put myself out there if I don't need to? So that's where I'm at. So this week we're going to do an episode with Dean Moll. I'll let him introduce himself. He's I would say one of the friends I've met through iRacing. He races in a lot of different stuff, and we're going to talk about the 24 Hours of Le Mans that's coming up, and just the iRacing special events in general, because, as you know, I really like the iRacing special events. I think I just said Le Mans, which is a thing you do when you're giving birth, right? So is it Le Mans, right? Stupid speech impediment. Yeah, why does a guy with a speech impediment and a nasally voice have a podcast anyway? I don't know. Here's the interview. All right, so I'm here with Dean Moll. Dean, say hi.
Hey, Kevin. How you doing?
Well, we're doing just fine. So Dean and I are both fathers, and we both have kids around the same age. I have my son Harry just turned 4. I remember when I announced we were pregnant on the stream. It's now he's just turned 4, so we are getting up there. And Teddy's a year and a half. How old are your kids, Dean?
We have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and definitely enjoyable, but can make finding time to sim race a bit challenging.
Yeah, and my wife is traveling this week. She travels every other week, but for the month of August, she's gone all month. So I'm Mr. Mom around the house.
Yeah, that'll be tough for some sim racing for sure.
Yeah, it was one of the reasons why I've stopped racing on the regular, because it's hard to keep a steady schedule when you also got to deal with the kids. But being a father and being an AI racer, not exactly the most compatible things in the world. When did you start iRacing?
I actually started iRacing from the very beginning. So it was before iRacing when I joined back in 2004 under First. So I came in the alpha beta testing program, and I have been around ever since.
Oh, I didn't know you were involved for that long. I did NASCAR 2003.
Yes, I started sim racing with the original NASCAR racing on floppy disks. Definitely showing my age a little bit. iRacing started when they were doing after the Project Wildfire mod. So basically testing using the IROC cars and trucks and kind of developing the sporting code and some things like the incident system we have today, things like that.
So that's interesting that we didn't run into each other. Because I was doing NASCAR Racing 1. I don't know if you saw on the podcast, I flung up all the CDs.
Yeah, absolutely. Saw that. I know you can kind of get into your little bit of groups and cliques, I guess, as you're running with different folks.
Yeah, especially, yeah. So what name did you run under, though?
My username was Penzane, so I have that on Twitch as my username. I pretty much go by DM31 now. Also ran under old DWM, so kind of a Darrell Waltrip hint there.
Yeah. I think I was Killer Kev way back in the day. And now I've been RutgersKev since I took like a little break and I got back into it with NASCAR sim racing. Ugh.
Yeah, that one I didn't do a whole lot of. So I was pretty much offline leagues, and then when I started online, it was the NASCAR league. So NASCAR with 2 S's. Drove there online, and then basically went straight from that into iRacing. Well, I guess I should mention the main reason I got involved with iRacing is I ran Virtual Racing World. So it was a league run by Nim Cross, and that's kind of what got me involved in the circles to get involved with the crew for the alpha and beta testing.
Oh, so I didn't know that either. I didn't know that you know Nim.
Yeah, I actually met Nim in person. This is going to be another thing that, kind of dates me a little bit, but back when they had the LAN events, like Reel was one, Toledo Sim Racing was another. So I attended a few of those, ended up sitting next to Nim at one. So got to know him through that, and Facebook friends, that type of thing. Don't really keep up too much now, but it's always fun to see him in a race.
Yeah, Nim and I have been friendly for a while. I even ran an endurance race with him and his brother. Very, very good people. I think. I think that they don't get the credit that they deserve. I think more and more so now. But geez, with the amount of stuff he has to deal with, my hat's off to him.
Oh, absolutely. Just to be managing the protest system for as long as he had and deal with a number of issues. I mean, just to keep a good attitude is definitely impressive out of that. Nim does a really good job.
Yeah, exactly. So you had been running in special events with the iRacing Today radio show. Did you start with them when team racing first started?
Yes, I was a listener of that podcast, and then they kind of put out a call to the listeners to join in. So when they did the first 24 hours of Daytona, I started in there with the user team. I think we had 6 guys, and that group's grown pretty much. So we're up to, gosh, I want to say the Discord has around 80 active members, and we typically enter 3 to 4 teams in every endurance race now.
Yeah, and one thing I like is that you guys keep track of your results on the website. I say you guys, but are you any kind of admin or anything over there?
Yeah, I help chat out with the Discord server a little bit. So if you go to irtmteam.com, there's a link. Anyone's free to join the Discord. We're a team, but we're pretty much just a loose association of iRacers. So Chad Dalton runs that program. He's kind of our endurance race coordinator and just help out with some Discord things. And when it comes time for the endurance races, help sure the teams are organized, make sure that everyone, if we have new people, that they're kind of aware of some of the things that you generally need to keep in mind when you run an endurance race.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing where people sometimes forget about the special events. I think we got a lot of elitist in iRacing, especially in the forums, that if you're not in the top split, you don't really care or your opinion doesn't matter. And that's what these special events do is exactly what you said. So there's a loose association of members that listen to this show, and every endurance race, they all just get together and race. They don't, outside the endurance team events, they don't run generally in the same series. They don't purposely sign up for a race so they can all run the same strength of field. There's a unique special thing about these special events, and they treat it as such. And, they send the call out for registration like a month before the event, and they treat it like it's special. And even though the team might be in the fourth and fifth splits, it's a good way to hang out with friends and to get together for something that's meaningful. And I think people are forgetting that people who are, for lack of a better word, average or sometimes even below average iRacers, use these special events as a way to get together with friends and have fun. And I think that's what we're supposed to be doing here, is having fun.
Yeah, that's the big key of it, is just, get together, have a good time. And as you mentioned, we have a pretty good range of iRating. So when we're forming the teams, let's try to something we keep people of equal skill sets together. But as you mentioned, the people in lower split 5, 8, 10, whatever, everyone's out there trying to do the same thing, to do the best job they can, bring the car home clean. And it's a real good sense of accomplishment when you finish a race and you've had a good, solid result that everyone's proud of. I mean, it's always cool. The races end. We always do the split that starts at 9 a.m. on Saturday. So about 9 o'clock on Sunday, everyone will kind of come back in and just hang out. And, it's just a sim race, but at the same time, you kind of get that sense of accomplishment, that we came together, we did this, and had a lot of fun in the process.
Right. So you're kind of stepped up your game. I've only known you for like basically since December when I came back into iRacing. So, but since then, when I came back, you've kind of stepped your game up and joined a couple leagues. You might have been in some leagues before that, but not of the mid to top tier league. So, give me a little bit of your what you are doing with leagues now.
Okay, so basically the goal for me and kind of IRTM is to get into some of the higher leagues. So I've driven in Neo 2 years ago for KRT Motorsports, which kind of split up, but now I'm also involved with SRN Motorsports. So I've run full-time in that league 2 years ago, and then I did the 24-hour race each of the past 2 seasons. And then this year I'm also racing Autobahn with SRN. And then I try to pick some different official series as well. This year I'm doing the Le Mans series and the HPD, also running Dirt Oval, which I'm horrible at. But in the past, I've done anything from GT3, GTE, IndyCar. So nothing really that consistent. I don't stick with the car, but getting involved in the leagues is definitely enjoyable when they're well run.
Aren't you guys doing Sports Car Open?
We're going to attempt to qualify for it. I saw that you got a team signed up there, and we do as well. So hopefully we can both make it and have some good racing.
Yeah, so there's that too. And so these are, this is more than your casual leagues, is what I'm saying. So good.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I should mention a major series as well. We're both running there, and I know we've kind of sent some messages back and forth about setup and strategy and everything. I know one of the things I've been kind of tracking is trying to run in some broadcast leagues and looking at Sim Racing Observer, the iRankings, and seeing where I'm at there. So I know I'm not one of the top guys, but it's neat seeing your name on the list up against some of the elite iRacers that are out there.
I mean, I've been saying that for a while. If you're out there looking for a league, look for a broadcasted league. Autobahn, they generously went out of their own pocket to pay for the broadcast, but this season, because I guess for whatever reasons, they asked people to pay $10. $10. Sign me up for that. I mean, $10. I get however many races, and I get the broadcast afterwards. In terms of a per hour basis, I definitely got my $10 worth. So as for you as a driver, if you are interested in seeing that kind of stuff and having the broadcasters say your name and getting your paint scheme on the screen, you know, even if only 100 people see it, but if you have that sense of pride that you can then show it to your coworkers or something like that, you know, I definitely recommend it. I don't know how many times I've explained to people what I do, and then I show them my stream, and then they're like, oh, all right, you know, but then I'll show them like the GSRC broadcast, and then they're like, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, the broadcasts are definitely great for that. And even just some simple streams of your events. So we did 24 Hours of Le Mans last year, and one of the guys on our team had a friend over in the UK who ended up watching our stream on the bar at a bar. So he basically had them put it up on a TV. A bunch of other people were there watching it, you know, so we're sitting there doing the race and then watching the stream up on Twitch, seeing their comments, you know, everyone cheering us on. So it's little things like that, you know, that even if someone who's not a sim racing fan can kind of get involved and see how you're doing. So I agree on the broadcast standpoint. I mean, the amount of money that you pay to participate in these leagues is nothing for the time you get back. And it's really cool to kind of even go back and watch a broadcast after you've participated in the race to see if you get any mentions, exposure, that type of thing.
All right, so people care about this stuff. So why don't you tell me what kind of wheel that you use and if you have a cockpit or anything like that?
Yeah, my setup has expanded quite a bit in the last few years. So for a wheel, I'm using the AccuForce, and pedal set, the Heusenfeld Ultimate set. And then I've got
all right, big spender. All right, calm down.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I've started with the G25, G27, and then, you know, as I've had a little bit more cash, kind of expanded the rig. Running a 4-play racing setup, so the 80/20 aluminum profile. And the big change was I was running VR and streaming that. Actually, the last race I did in VR was the one that we ran together at Bathurst. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, the nausea just kind of got to me, and I ended up stopping and going back to a monitor.
Oh, that's a shame, because, man, I love my VR. I can't. That Autobahn race, so we just ran the 90 minutes of Autobahn on Monday. We're recording this on Wednesday, and I was in the HPD, and there's GTEs and LMP1s and HPDs, and man, the open cockpit of the HPD, and then I just had so much fun. As I was thinking as I was running the race, like, man, I'm having so much fun. I can't imagine going back to triples. So I really hope like things don't change in the next 10 years where I start to get nauseous or anything. That I'd be very sad.
Yeah, it took me about 6 months to be able to use it. So starting even 5 minutes at a time, I kind of built up to it. I got a fan blowing in my face. Taking ginger supplements for anti-nausea, and eventually Bathurst was obviously a bad track with the elevation changes, but going back to a monitor, and it's VR taught me a lot of things about driving, such as looking into corners, and I've been able to keep that on the monitor. So fortunately, it hasn't been too big of a setback. But hopefully, if I can upgrade my processor when the next generation comes out, I'll be able to go back to VR, because I definitely think it's a game changer.
I guess I've just been the lucky one. I've had absolutely no problems, not even with heat or sweating. If it is skybox where there's like no clouds, so it's very bright, yeah, then I will get sweaty. So I do have a fan, but I don't even run it half the time. Like during the Autobahn, which was at night, I didn't have my fan on. So I guess I've just been lucky. But man, I sing the praises of VR. So speaking of singing the praises, what pedals did you use before upgrading?
I have gone through, so I said I used the Logitech wheels, then I went to the Fanatec, I think it was the Elite pedals, so it was a load cell, but kind of their lower end pedal set.
Mm-hmm.
Then I had a set of Proto Simtex after that, and I ended up going to a simulation place here in Indianapolis that they had a set of, I got to drive the HE pedals and the HPP pedals as well, and it's not a huge upgrade from the Proto Simtex, but it just had some additional things I was looking for to kind of tweak my setups. That's why I made the upgrade.
So can you notice any difference?
Yeah, so the big thing that the Ultimates have, the brake force is way more than I use. I'm probably only running them at 30 to 40% of max force. So that probably isn't where I'm getting the advantage. But what they have is like RC shocks or dampers on the throttle pedal and on the brakes. And I can basically adjust that where it smooths out my throttle pedal inputs. And then also as I release the throttle pedal, the pedal doesn't spring back as much. You can use the damper to kind of counteract that force. It just makes my transition on and off the throttle smoother, so I'm not throwing the weight balance off on the car.
You can like see that in your lap times?
Yeah, VRS is kind of a big tool. It's been helping me actually see the throttle and brake traces. And I think the big thing is I don't know if I'm actually quicker, but I'm much more consistent and I don't crash nearly as much. So I've kind of jumped up my iRating a little bit over the last year, and that's primarily just due to keeping the car on the track.
Well, VR has definitely helped me be. I do have V3 pedals. I had the Elites. I also got a used V2, and I really struggled with that. And I think it was just because it was used. You know, it's not like the load cell needed to be replaced. I could see it. You know, I used the proper amount of force. I get the proper amount of brake, but I was having a lot of trouble with it. And now I upgraded to these V3s. I've had these for like 2 years, and even then I wasn't that great. And then go into VR, like you can really, for me at least, I could really sense like the speed of the car. I could really feel like the weight transfer. Basically, I talked about this before. When the light switch came for me racing ovals, talking about the Cup car. When the light switch came was when I started to figure out what the car was doing in terms of weight transfer. So I could, you know, I don't have a motion rig, but I could feel the car shift the weight to the left side when you enter the corner. And that's when I knew I could get back on the gas because all the weight was already on the left side. And then I could feel, you know, the weight shift back over. So when I was getting too tight, so I could get off the throttle, you know, and that's when really the light switch went. And I went from an 1700 iRating to 4500. And I never really had that experience on the roadside. I was pretty much just, you know, a blind squirrel catching a nut. And then since upgrading to VR, I really feel like that I'm above average now on the road. I finished 15th in the Spa race with an hour of practice, and for that would have never happened without VR. I don't think.
Yeah, VR really makes a big difference. So I definitely notice it myself. Going back to monitors, it's kind of more memorizing braking points again because you don't really have that speed sensation. Where I notice it is if I have someone who's new to iRacing and they try out my rig. When I had triples, people would basically constantly wreck. You know, the first time they go into corner, they wouldn't brake on time. With VR, you'd put people on that same situation, and then they would actually brake and make the corner because you have that sense of speed that shows in VR, but not necessarily on a monitor setup.
Yeah, that's true too. I did when I went to Skip Barber. One of the first things I noticed was a sense of speed that I wasn't getting. I never really picked up. I guess I wouldn't say a sense of speed, but I would actually say a sense of slowing down. Actually, one of my biggest problems is that I don't brake enough, so I would enter the corner with too much speed. Then I'd have to scrub off speed mid corner. That was when I was in triples. But when I've gone to VR, I really got the sense of like, okay, I'm going too fast here. I need to slow down, you know? Because when you enter the corner and then you can see the apex and you kind of, again, you feel the weight transfer, even though you're not actually feeling anything. It's just, you know, like you just kind of know what the car's doing. I know what the car's doing more in VR now. All right, I think we've sung the praises of VR enough. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have tried it and hate it, or people that are jealous of us. So let's get to the main topic of hand. I think we've established Dean's creds. Anyone who knows me knows my cred. You know, 10-year member of iRacing. I really love these special events, et cetera, et cetera. So let's talk about what's coming up and what happened. So I guess we'll go in the past because we haven't had an episode here since the iRacing Indy 500. So the 24 hours of Spa was ran, and Spa and iRacing is notorious for off tracks. Really, their off track system is, I don't know what you would say, tight, strict. It's certainly strict, that's for sure, compared to some other tracks. And there's some times where you can get a off track and get a really big speed advantage, and there's other times where you're just like barely like on the curb, and you get an off track. So it's very possible to rack up 5, 6, 7 if you're trying even more off tracks a lap. And if there's no penalty for getting an off track and you're racing in a race where you're serious about winning, you would want to go off track, especially on certain corners, because it's strictly faster and there's no penalty. So what happened was they ran the 24 hours of Spa, and Dean was in the race. So Dean, why don't you tell me what the final results were with the incident points in the split that you were in?
It was a little bit crazy. So we were, I don't know if fortunate's the right word, but the car that won our split ended up racking up, I think, more incidents than the majority of other teams that ran the event. So there's a thread basically kind of going through the stats. The car that ended up winning our split averaged, I think it was 2.6 off tracks per lap. So over the course of the event, that was around 1,800 incident points for the race. We were a car that basically chose to try to keep the car on the track. I mean, as you mentioned, Spa is a difficult track, and if you go a foot off in some places, even though you're on a curb, you'll still get that 1X. And we had 400, which I thought was a lot. When you compare it to the car that won, it wasn't even close.
Yeah, and you had 400 because, yeah, that sucks, but it's not like when you had 200, somebody on the team went, oh no, we better take it easy now.
No, absolutely. You just kind of know you're going to take a hit on your individual license, but you keep pushing through it. The difference was our car was 1 to 2 foot off. The lead car was choosing to go off track. So I don't know how many folks are familiar with Spa, but there's a fairly high speed left-hand turn on the backstretch called Blancpain, where it's close to flat out. You have to do a little lift, but you need to keep some wing in the car essentially to keep the rear from coming around. On that corner, they were driving halfway through the turn and then going straight, and were 5 to 10 car lengths wide coming off the corner, and then they would swing back onto the track. So just that's an example of some extreme abuse where you can run a looser setup, less wing, get away with more speed elsewhere on the track because you're essentially skipping the way that corner should be run and taking all the risk out of it.
Spa has a couple corners like that where you can go off track because they have a lot of runoff there for safety reasons. But you just use the runoff and you're faster. But again, so my thoughts at the time was that they were actually following the rules. The rules of iRacing say if you go off track, then you get a 1X on your license. And your license says you're on a certain number of corners per incident. And at the end of the race, if you went off track too much, then your license goes down. So if they were willing to get their license down, then they were following the rules of iRacing. So some people were saying, that was a very small minority of people were saying these guys were cheating. And I can see why people would take that. I mean, you're taking a corner that you're supposed to basically slow down for, and they're going flat out. Is that cheating? Well, yeah. I mean, to real life racing, sure, because there's actual track marshals there and track limits, and they enforce these things. But iRacing doesn't. So if iRacing's not going to enforce it, and you're going faster when you do it, and you're willing to take the license hit, in my opinion, more power to you. Now, it shouldn't be that way, and I think we can all I think we all agree to that. There should be, rules. It shouldn't be the Wild West, right, Dean?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that actually ended up being a fun discussion when I was in the car around 3 a.m. in the morning. So it wasn't our team, but another team called out the leader. And their response was basically, real racing teams take advantage of everything that's not in the rules. We're doing nothing wrong, which technically was right. But when you look at, you've got two cars kind of blatantly abusing the track limits, which in real life, I think probably would be a warning from the officials, which is a luxury we don't have in sim racing. But, per the sporting code, it's not a protestable situation. They're not doing anything illegal. So, the results of the race stands. There's really nothing you can do about it.
And even the rules of the race. The race that you're in, there's no black flags or any penalties or anything for doing this stuff. So again, I don't think there's any reason why it wouldn't stand. But it's still, I mean, it sucks. I mean, this is a racing simulator. You shouldn't be going off the track 1,800 times in 24 hours in a racing simulator. So that's the circle back. Okay, so now let's compare that to the major series. Dean, you did international, right? So have you actually done Spa yet?
No, actually, I'm practicing this week. So I know you ran Spa this past weekend. International run Spa this week.
Yeah, so that actually that's kind of sucks. You haven't done it yet, so we don't have the comparison. But okay, so Spa, we did 2.4 hours of Spa in the same kind of cars. It was all the GT3 cars. So for 2.4 hours, we had 34 incidents, 35, 34. I forget, but so that's it. So instead of 1,800 in 24 hours, you had 35 in 2.4 hours. So, so what happened, and this is what should happen, is why I'm using it as an example. I'm driving along the first hour of the race, and if my two wheels go a little bit over the curb and I get a 1X, I might say a curse word, but it's not, affecting my day, Now it's the last stint. I'm triple stinting my tires, so I really have no tires. And then I you overshoot a couple corners because you have no tires and your braking points have to change and stuff like that. Now you start racking up the incidents. Now there's like a half hour to go and I have 28. So now I'm like, if I get a 4X, I have 32. So now in the last half hour, maybe 40 minutes, I only have really 3 off tracks to play with because I got to give myself at least a 4X buffer. So these are the things you got to think about. So now I backed my pace up. Now I'm not going full out pushing. Now I'm actually backing my pace up. And this time, now people caught me because they're on fresher tires than me, and I didn't fight them. I didn't. Maybe because it's a road course, it's a little harder to pass. I could have fought them a little bit more. But then you risk taking a 4X, and if you risk a 4X when you don't have any room to give in a safety rating, you are playing with fire, in my opinion. So I let him go. I wound up finishing the race with like 3 incidents to spare, and I got a good finish out of it. And in my opinion, that's the way, especially endurance racing, should be. In actual real-life endurance racing, now, maybe not at the very, very top tier, but we're talking like the 24-hour series, okay? I think that's the best example. These are pretty much amateur racers, and that's all we are. We're all amateur racers. In the 24-hour series, they have to take care of their car. You can't just go full out sprint for 24 hours. You've got to take it easy in some parts. If your shifting is a little dodgy, you've got to take it easy on the shifter, maybe not downshift as much. All these different things that happen in endurance racing. And even in real life racing, you look at like the real life Le Mans 24 hours and the whole WEC, these cars go off the track, the splitter goes in the grass, these guys have to pit. If you get any kind of off track and you get any kind of dirt or grass or anything in your grill, these cars pit because you just cannot do that in these real life supercars. So I don't see why that can't be the same in iRacing, and it is, and we make it that way through the safety rating. So, do you just have anything to piggyback on that before we move on to what they're doing for the Le Mans 24?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I mean, the key for real endurance racing is you need to take care of the car, which is kind of an element that we're missing. And I think it goes back and forth. So the incident limit's nice because that's the one way to enforce keeping people on the track. But as you said, in the majors race on the flip side, it also puts you in a situation where you can't race. And that part can be frustrating as well. So I think there's a happy balance there, different ways to kind of look at it. As you mentioned, there's some potential changes coming up for the Le Mans race, and it'll be interesting to see how it goes. There's certainly been a lot of discussion in the forums and elsewhere as far as what people think the direction that should head is.
You see, but let's just touch base on that, okay? So you said it put the incident limit put me in a spot where I can't race, and that sucks. In my opinion, no, the incident limit didn't put me in that situation. My driving in the first hour and a half put me in that situation. You know, if I was taking care of the car, quote unquote, or driving better, I would have less incidents. And if I had less incidents, I could take more of a risk in the later part of the race. I think it added an extra layer of strategy that, you know, every little thing matters and you need to really take care of the car. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I agree to an extent. So the reason I say the frustrating part is you can't race is, you know, managing your incident limits, knowing going in is a point. But if you compare it to real racing, if you go off track consistently, you'll get a warning. However, if you're racing side to side with another car, in addition to that off track warning, and you bump doors on a straightaway, in real life, that would not be an incident. You know, you'd be able to continue racing. Whereas in iRacing, that 4X could send you over the incident limit and disqualify you. So I think their car contact to me kind of is a separate thing from abusive track limits. And I think the incident limit was put in place mostly to catch people who were having recurring issues with car contact and not necessarily off track. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what the solution is going forward, if they split those or if it'll stay merged under a single point system like it is now.
See, but again, like what you said was that going off track would have in real life got you an abusive track limits. You know, I went off track 28 times in 2.4 hours. So I should have got an abusive track limits. I probably should have even got a penalty if this was real life. So in iRacing, I actually got a penalty for going off track 28 times because it cut down on my ability to race. That was a self-inflicted penalty because I went off the track, you know, and if I now in Autobahn, I barely had any incidents. So I was actually door to door with another HPD for 3/4 of a lap. We were side by side all the way out of the bus stop until the second horseshoe. We were side by side the whole way through there. It was great. And we didn't touch or get a 4X, but I felt comfortable being side by side with him for the entire lap because I hadn't abused the car since then.
Yeah, that's absolutely part of it. I mean, I had, I think 4 incidents through the course of that race, and it was one of those things where at Daytona, it's kind of a situation where you end up saving them. For example, there's a definite time gain in the bus stop on the backstretch to, if you get a 1X there, you can maybe gain 0.2 a lap. So had I needed it, I was trying to keep those in my pocket essentially towards the end of the race if, you know, I needed it in order to pick up a spot. Turns out I didn't, but like you said, your incident limit is pretty much your responsibility. So it can either pin you in a corner or be used to your advantage during a race.
Yeah, the 24-hour series used to do, for the amateur classes, they used to do joker laps. So if you were registered as an amateur car, you had a certain time delta that you couldn't go under. But 10 laps of the whole race, you were allowed to go under it. So it kind of sucked because the time delta was very conservative. So people were pretty much just exactly running the time delta every lap. So really there was no way to catch up. So that's why they got rid of it. But what they would do is they would like strategically put their best driver in during a time where the track conditions were perfect. And then that driver would, basically the team engineer would monitor the track and say, okay, you're not going to have any traffic on this lap, go, you know, and then that's when he would set his joker, and it just added an extra layer of strategy. And I think that's what the X system does in Autobahn and in major series, in my opinion. It just makes a joker lap. You know, I have 7 laps to go and I have a 12 incident cushion. You could better bet your butt I'm going to run the bus stop as hard as I can, because that 1X doesn't matter. And people come back and say, well, you have the option to run the bus stop more times than me because you didn't get a 4X and I got a 4X. Well, you know what? Tough cookies, in my opinion. Okay, this is the system we have. And if you were in a real car, you got hit on the side, you would probably have to pit.
Yeah, that's definitely something that happens in the real world. I know, obviously, there's some netcode issues that can lead to some 4Xs. That's something I've seen running international. The servers are Australia based, so I've seen situations where I've had 4X contact that typically wouldn't be in my experience, but it definitely is not normal. It's more of the kind of outlier situation.
iRacing has netcode and real life has part failures. You know what I mean? So that's the way that I look at it. I look at it as like, things happen, but things happen in real life racing too. You don't know if your 20-cent screw is going to fall out and your engine block falls out of your car, something silly. And even if the team can fix it and you spend 20 minutes in the pits, then you're not going to win. These things happen in real life too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you see all these instructions to stay off the curbs in a real race because you may damage the car or vibrate something loose. And sim racing, you can abuse them all you want because you're not going to hurt anything.
Right. And if you're a fan of racing, and I don't mean you, Dean, I mean the people that are listening. If you're a fan of racing, definitely check out the N24 series. They're on YouTube. They have the complete races. Now I'll admit that's kind of boring, even though I do watch them. But they have them broken down into highlight videos, and basically almost all the highlight videos are just interviews with the participants that they don't air during the actual broadcast. So they tell you, like, they will say, in the 6-hour mark, this car had to pit for a gearbox issue, and then it will go to an interview, and it's the guy who was driving it saying, like, yeah, I was too hard on the shifter. That's my fault. Like, these are amateur drivers. They're mostly just rich guys, but that's cool. I think, in my opinion, that these guys are too hard on the shifter. So now they have a penalty where they got to go fix the gearbox. That's what we're missing in iRacing, because we don't have changing track conditions really. We don't have day night. We don't have random part failures. Going off the track into the grass doesn't really do anything. So we got to have something to kind of mix things up and make it more interesting.
Yeah, I guess the incident limit can be one tool, as you said, to kind of avoid those off-track situations that in real life would potentially cause an issue. It's random failures. I mean, can't have that with the PC, internet, whatever. And I kind of always look at that as a technical failure. But yeah, I mean, it's something that is exciting to see some of the videos that iRacing's put out as far as the direction they're going with some changes and making it a more realistic and interactive environment.
Yeah, and they make it more realistic. My opinion on the incident system might change. So now we'll go to Le Mans 24 hours. It's in about 10 days from when we're recording this. I'm running in it. You are too, Dean, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'll be running it with the IRTM.
In an HPD like me?
No, I think I'm going to be running we'll have an HPD team, but I'm going to be running in the LMP1 and give that car a try.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be the most popular class by far, the LMP1s.
Yeah, I mean, those cars were essentially designed for Le Mans, so I don't think you'll see a lot of Audis, but definitely a lot of Porsche 919s on track.
And you didn't run majors Le Mans. Well, I keep saying Le Mans, but it's Le Mans. But sorry to the people who I am triggering out there. That's just the way I say it. Okay, Dean.
Yeah, no, I missed that one. We had a vacation plan, so it was either bad timing for that race or good timing because I'm not missing a majors points race. But like I said, looking forward to the 24 coming up.
And we didn't have a very big grid for that race, so you can't really compare them on a one-to-one basis. But again, that race just hammered home again just how much work we really have to go in terms of these special events or endurance races, because we got spun in turn one the first time the LMP1s got to us. Somebody just frankly just ran us over, and we spent a little bit in the pits, and then we never made that time up for the rest of the race. And there really was no way to make that up because there's not changing track conditions. There's no penalty for going off the track. There's no different tires, those kind of things. So, in my opinion, yes, that is part of what endurance racing is. You got to stay out of the pits to win, but at the same time, it's kind of like, I don't even think like frustrating is the word, because in my case, we were like 3 minutes behind. So it's not like we were 30 seconds and we were like within grasp and it was just out of our fingers. You know, that would be frustrating. It was me, like I ran the last 5 hours of that race, just me. And I was just like, you know, just logging laps. And it's just kind of like, you know, am I really having fun? You know, as it was 2, 3 in the morning.
Yeah, those times could definitely be repetitive. It's interesting. You know, I've listened to some real racing podcasts talking about Le Mans. A lot of people there refer to it as a more pure racing experience where you don't have the yellows that you have in North American racing to kind of pack up the field, which I guess is what we're used to, kind of being fans of NASCAR and some of the local series. But it's definitely a key. I mean, from my experience in the endurance races, you just have to keep the car on track and out of the pits as long as possible. I've been fortunate enough to win a couple 24-hour races, and I think in both of those have had maybe 30 seconds of damage combined. But if you have one pit stop of a minute, you know, you'll be driving, as you said, for hours trying to make that ground up, and you can only claw it back maybe a second a lap. So it definitely can make your race a lot more difficult.
And then like Daytona is such a short track that you're constantly dealing with traffic every lap. There's times that now, again, major series at a much smaller field, but there were times where like I would go 5 laps and I wouldn't see another car. It was like, you know, it was just kind of like an exercise in futility or something like that. And it's just kind of like, you know, boy, this would be a lot more interesting if the sun was coming up and therefore the track was getting hotter or just something like that. Or just something.
Yeah, that was the kind of interesting part. I don't remember the official race I think it was default weather a year ago, so there wasn't a change there. The Neo 24 Hours of Le Mans was interesting this year because one of the competitors kind of did a plot of the temperature, and there was a kind of a cyclical approach throughout the race, which really made a big difference on your lap time. I was driving with SRN in that race, and I was probably the slowest driver in the car going into the race, but when I got in was the lowest track temperature. So I was actually able to run comparable lap times, but on the flip side, I was a lap short on fuel because I was running quicker than expected there, whereas the other drivers in the car were able to save that extra lap. So that was neat. I'm kind of hoping that's a preview of what we get with the dynamic weather. So, you know, looking forward to that change. Unfortunately, it won't be in for this year, but I think going forward, if that, you know, that'll really make these races a lot more interesting because you'll see people kind of picking up speed overnight, losing speed potentially based on the setup. So it'll definitely make it a much more fun event instead of some of the repetition just logging laps.
So because of what happened at Spa, and this has been ongoing for a while, it's just Spa was kind of the tipping point, they decided to implement a incident limit for this 24-hour race that's coming up here. And this is the first time that a incident limit has been in effect for a 24-hour team race. And in episode 9, I talked about this with Randy when the Le Mans 6-hour series was starting. They decided what the incident limit should be, and then they just like arbitrarily picked a number. And then there was a big outroar from the fans or the drivers, so they upped it to 50. So you have 50 for 6 hours. And even so, I don't want to just rehash what I said before in episode 9. Go back and listen to that. All my episodes are time stamped, so it's really be easy to find that discussion. So I'm not really going to have a conversation about the overall what the incident limit is supposed to do, because I've already talked about that in episode 9. I think we kind of hashed that out pretty good. Just cliff notes. If the incident limit is to keep dangerous drivers off the track, are you really doing that if the incident limit is 50? Because there's a lot of carnage that could be done in 50. And if the incident limit is designed to make you take care of the car, then why is it 50 when for the Le Mans series that's an hour, it's 17? So why is it 17 for 1 hour and 50 for 6 hours? They don't really have any consistency there, and it seems like not even they know what the sporting code is for. Okay, that is the too long didn't read. So This is the first ever time where they've had an incident limit for a team race, and people are digging their heels in the ground because they're like, yeah, sure, this is Le Mans where I said it again. This is Le Mans where they designed it where you get cut courses. So if you go over the curb on the chicane at Spa, you would get a 1X but no cut course, and at Le Mans you get a cut course, and the cut course is pretty severe in some places. I've seen it as much as 4 seconds. So you get a slowdown, and you got to take that slowdown. If it's 4 seconds, that's really like almost 20 seconds. But you can get a big slowdown and not even get a off track. So they set the incident limit at 100. So again, for a 6-hour race, it was 50, and that was 50 at first. Let's put it that way. It wasn't even before they ran the first race. It was 50. That wasn't the original number. But now they decided for a 24-hour race they want to make it 100. When for an hour race it's 17. So people are digging their heels into the ground because they're like the principle of the thing. You know, they make an incident limit for 100 now. What's going to happen when it's Daytona and we get a 1X every time in the bus stop? So Dean, just give me your thoughts on the incident limit for a 24-hour race and how you feel about the 100, and then I'll go off of what you say.
Okay. I think for Le Mans specifically, I can understand having the debate right now around, does it make sense to put it in? There's not a lot of logic on a 2-hour race versus a 6-hour race versus a 24-hour race. I think for this track, I don't really know if it's going to make that big a difference. Just kind of looking at the numbers from the majors race, I think maybe there was one team that would maybe have run into issues with that 100. The 24 hours here I've never had more than 4 incidents. So I think generally the discussion around 100 forcing half the teams out is a pretty big overreaction. I think you're not going to see a lot because a few places you can get a 1X, and those are situations where you've basically blown the corner and you're running wide through a sand trap. So you're not going to be gaining any time. But I think it's fair to have that discussion. You know, what's the right number for a race? As you said, when the incident limit initially came in, it was put in place to stop dangerous driving. And even at 50, that's, 14 cars you could wreck out with a 4X contact. So that's not necessarily right. But I don't know. I think it's Spa. You definitely need a number that makes sense. But I think the big thing we just need is some consistency and approach as far as how they're applied.
All right, and then so people are like, well, what happens when we go to Daytona? So yeah, maybe it's not a big deal at Le Mans, but what happened when it goes to Daytona and I get a 1X every time at the bus stop? Well, my answer to that is simple. Don't get a 1X in the bus stop. Slow down more in the bus stop so you don't get your 1X. I mean, I don't know how this isn't rocket science, people. You know, if it's faster to go through the bus stop and get a 1X on exit, okay, great. Now the rules have changed. You don't get a 1X in the bus stop anymore. I mean, the bus stop is not that hard of a corner to make it through the corner. It's a little hard to go too wide through there, but that's another story. So, all you have to do is slow down and rotate the car before you get back on the throttle, and you can get through there easily without a 1X. The reason why you get a 1X on the exit of the bus stop is because it's faster to just kind of keep a straight line through there instead of just keep turning the wheel to the right. And getting a 1X is no big deal. Well, now they've changed the rules of the game, guys. So slow down more on your entry so you can have a more rotation there in the middle of the bus stop so you can exit. This isn't now. Spa is different. Spa should be totally changed, and I think that iRacing would have more common sense to have a 100 limit for Spa. But I can't see 100 being an issue at Daytona either. Just change the way you've driven Daytona all these years. Would you disagree with that?
No, I completely agree. I mean, the rules are the same for everyone. You know it going into the race. And as you said, it's how much risk you want to take. So going through the bus stop, you can push it, but you might get a 1X and you've got to weigh, I've got X amount I need to accommodate for. I think that having an incident limit is the right way to go for these, just to prevent some of the abusive situations that we saw at Spa. I mean, as far as how you pick that number, I don't know necessarily what makes sense from a driving standpoint. And a competition standpoint, that's probably something that needs to be taken a little bit more time than a rash reaction. And I think that seems to be why the community reacted the way they did, is they feel like iRacing's just throwing this in as a reaction to Spa. But as someone who was in a race with a car that was abusing the track limits, I mean, it genuinely had a negative interpretation of me, I guess, of the way some teams were treating it. Granted, we already had that discussion that's within the rules, but if you want to see a fair competition, then, you know, I think you just need to know the rules going into it, and hopefully there's some controls put in place to prevent some of the abuse that we saw there.
Right, and the only way to make it fair is to actually have rules. So, to piggyback on that, have you seen the discussions in the forums about the GTEs, quote unquote, jumping the start?
Yeah, I've seen some of the videos of that. I know one particular offending driver, I saw a Twitch clip from his cockpit as well. Definitely not a situation you want to see. Until this issue came up with some of the big wrecks, I didn't realize that was actually a thing, that some of the GTE drivers were actually trying to jump the start to get ahead of the prototypes in order to get an advantage within their class.
Well, it wasn't so much to get ahead of the prototypes, even though, yeah, I guess that maybe that's a part of it. It's so what they're doing is, there's some people that don't go on the forums a lot, so let me just give you I think we put a ribbon on the whole incident limit thing. We're talking about this now because it's like the rules, and when there's no rules, this is what happens. This is why we need rules. This is why we need an incident limit. So what happened is that, as you probably know, in iRacing, the leader controls the start, and the leader can go pretty much any time the pace car leaves the racing surface. We saw this particularly happen in the dirt oval World Championship Series, where the leader actually started on the backstretch, because that's where the pace car pulls off. So the leader started the race on the backstretch, and nobody was ready for that. And then the second time around, he didn't go until the very, very, pretty much the start-finish line. And because everyone was anticipating the start, they all jammed up and crashed. So, so that's what happens, right? So in these multi-class races, and we're talking about IMSA specifically, the lead class is the prototypes. And unfortunately, in IMSA, there's not a lot of prototypes. In the specific example in the forums, there's only one, actually. So this prototype decides to go on green, which, again, is his right to do. He's the leader of the race, and he controls the start. So as what's been kind of a gentleman's agreement in iRacing for many years, the leader of the GTE leaves a gap between himself and the prototypes, and then that way the prototypes can get their jump, and then they don't have to really deal with them, because the prototypes hypothetically should be faster. So what that has turned into is the GTEs hang back 25 seconds or more, and then they start the race pretty much whenever the heck they want, which for the leader of the GTEs is pretty much in the most advantaged spot on the track possible for them. So the video in question occurs at Imola. So Imola has S's right before well, I guess it's a chicane, actually, right before the start-finish line, the front stretch, rather. So the leader of the GTE would hang back and then go right in the middle, right when the whole field would be in the chicane, if that makes sense. So everyone else is going slow, but he's able to go fast. So he's able to get a massive start while everybody else is kind of back there, kind of having to go through the chicane. That also leads to a bunch of chaos in the rear of the field, because people are going, some people aren't going, you're in the braking zone, et cetera, et cetera. And if we've all seen real life racing, you start at basically the front stretch, right? So it's not real. So what's happening is that the prototypes who are controlling the race are not going way back in the chicane. They're going on the front stretch. So the GTEs, they actually catch up to the prototypes, and then especially if you have like a slower prototype driver, it can cause chaos. So in this one particular instance, the prototype guy decided to go on green, and the GTE field decided whenever the hell they wanted to go, and they actually caught the guy before he even reached the start finish line, and one of the GTEs ran into him as he's sitting there in the middle of the track, going pace speed. So it's just another example of the Wild Wild West that we have in iRacing. There's no real laws or rules in terms of the start. There's no penalty for a GTE by going in the chicane. There's no penalty for a GTE for accelerating before the green flag is waved. Right? Even though he's not the leader of the race, even though he's not controlling the start, there's no penalty. So that's what happens. So on a platform of iRacing that they market themselves as a place that has rules. You know, are you sick and tired of going to public lobbies that are just a wreck fest? Well, come to iRacing because we actually have rules and a sporting code and a protest system and blah, blah, blah. And you see what the racing turns out to actually be sometimes. And it just is sad, really. And then at the other hand, iRacing is then sometimes shocked about how many people race hosted. There was talk about a lack of participation in the official series. Somebody posted stats, and one of the staff members said, in the summer months, things are slow, and you would be amazed how many people run hosted in leagues. Well, no, I wouldn't be amazed because hosted in leagues actually have some sort of organization and actual good sportsmanship. All right, Dean, take it away.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think the league environment, you generally have people, either league admins who are watching a race or after the race will kind of take care of some of those situations that in an official race are more of a gentleman's agreement, but in a league race, you can put additional rules in place. So I haven't seen the example you mentioned at Imola, actually. I saw another example of the GTEs jumping the start at Road America, so Imola's situation, if you're the GTE HPD leader in the second class, you want to take off in the chicane because you may be single file and you can accelerate before the second place person can. In the Road America example, it was a little bit larger field of prototypes, I think 5. The GTE leader left someone counted this and I read it. It was basically a 10-second gap, but then he accelerated 12 seconds before the pace car came in. So what you had there was a full speed pack of GTEs crashing into a pack of 5 Daytona prototypes, which basically wiped out the majority of the field. And then you had the GT3 field compiling into that as well. So that's definitely an issue. The gap is a gentleman's agreement. I've had situations where driving HPD this year, if the second place guy doesn't cooperate and he pulls up behind the LMP1 prototypes, you just got to kind of follow along in that situation. And you can't really control the race. So it's kind of in the same vein to me as the 1X discussion. It's kind of driver, unwritten rules essentially, and it's optional if you want to follow them or not. So it's sad to see the chaos that can come out of it, but it definitely drives you to a situation where leagues can be better. The Autobahn race we just drove had an issue where the grid was reversed, and I think that was a great example showing where if you've got good admins in a series, they can kind of handle that situation and resolve it appropriately. So in that case, we went single file, everyone stayed in a line, and then we took one additional lap under green, but at pace speed in order to resolve the situation. So that kind of shows the difference between some of the stuff you'll see in official versus hosted. And that does ultimately drive people to hosted, where you have some additional control elements that you don't have in official.
All right. Well, this was a good topic. Hopefully, we've generated some discussion. So, if you have any thoughts or feedback, leave a comment here on the YouTube video, or of course, you can leave a voicemail. Anybody's welcome to leave a voicemail. The number's still up there. We don't really get a lot of calls, but I would love to hear from people. Give their opinion of the race. I'd also love to hear people after the race. See any stories people had about the incident system or anything like that. And honestly, I think that would be a lot like poker tournament bust out hands. It's like, oh, I shoved with ace king and he called with queens and I lost. Well, how'd you get down the 5 big blinds? Well, that didn't matter. It's like you're only telling your bad luck instead of how you got there. But hey, if you want to tell your story, you're welcome to. The voicemail line's still open. It's in the comments. So it's in the podcast description. It's also in the YouTube description. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. So, Dean, can you give me your plugs? Give me if your team has a website, please tell me. And you have a Twitch, and do you have a YouTube as well? So, yeah, just give me all the information.
Yeah. Team I'm running with IRTM Endurance, which is kind of a spinoff of the Iracing Today radio show. So, our website is irtmteam.com. We have a link to our Discord there if you ever wanted to get involved in any endurance races, come on in and check that out. We're always welcome to have more people. We call it a community. We've really got a good group of racers who all are in it to have fun. And then other than that, running major series, so catch me there. Driving for SRI Motorsports in Autobahn. I race with them in Neo. It's a great group of guys as well. And most of my activities on Twitter, DM31, and Twitch is Penzane, Pennzane. And I just want to say thanks for having me on the show. I've been listening from the beginning and definitely appreciate the invite. It was fun to have some discussion tonight.
Thanks, Dean. Exactly. Thanks for actually coming on the show. Like I said, it was good to have a discussion instead of just me ranting. I didn't mean to say this in the beginning, and I actually don't know how many people are going to sit through the hour and 20 minutes the show has been, but I do want to give thank you to everybody who's messaged me over the last 2 months saying, hey, where's the podcast? Been really enjoying it. We're looking forward to the next one. I appreciate all the people that messaged me, all the people that have joined the Discord saying, hey, I like the show. Is it canceled? What's happening? So just the fact that people are listening to it, that means a lot to me. Thanks, guys. Hopefully you like this episode. JCT, John the bassist, Ricky Thompson, all the guys who have messaged me, Billy Smith. So I'm sure there's a lot of people I'm leaving out because I exactly don't have a list in front of me. But thanks, everybody. And that's the end of the show. Donk.
That's the end of my show. Donk.